We're going to go ahead and call this workshop to order. The workshop is to talk about sidewalks. With that.
Great.
Hi,
Well, thanks for having us tonight. Actually, this is going to be the Josh Hillman show, not the Andy Kraut show. We have Jacoby Toombs, I know. We have Jacoby Toombs and Lands under contract to help us update the 2011 master plan that they put together for us. They've been working on this for the last couple months, and we're not quite done yet, but we wanted to get in front of the council, give you an update on where we are, where we've been, and where we'd like to head from here. So with that, I'm going to let Josh, just turn it over to Josh, let him give you the presentation, then we can do some Q&A or something after. Thank you.
Good evening. Josh Hillman, JTL. I think everybody knows me, but just in case you don't. The Board of Works, the City of Jeff, asked JTL to do an update to the sidewalk master plan. We initially started this back in 2010, finished in 2011. During that original time, we had held a bunch of public input opportunities, workshops just like this, general input from public meeting where people came in and drew on a map what they wanted, and we took that, put it into a plan, implemented it, and went on. But just an overview, this is a way for the city to identify, encourage, promote, and provide safe and convenient walking routes. As we go through this presentation, and as I'm sure all of the council is aware, we have constructed a lot of projects over the last 8 or 9 years. So it helps us to find a missing link, a missing spot between a neighborhood or between an opportunity to get to a major thoroughfare like 8th Street or 10th Street to encourage pedestrian access. We're using this master plan as a way for us to prioritize, a way for us to set up a series of projects that over a 5-year or 7-year period of time can be constructed, and it helps to set up a budget so that the council and the fiscal body knows what they want to spend money on. So that's what we're doing here. We'll put a budget to each of the projects that gets selected or that gets put into the master plan. So in 2020, if you got 5 projects you want to build, you know what they're going to cost, around what they're going to cost as construction goes up and down. The original master plan, we had identified 24 projects, somewhere around $7 million. A lot of those have been constructed. A couple of those projects we got ready to design, and the neighborhood came back and said, no, we don't want that. So we've removed some of those projects from there as we went on. We completed 12 of them. 4 additional were incorporated into road projects. 3 of them got removed because neighborhoods like Skyline Acres said, we don't want that. And so the council and the city said, okay, we're not going to do it. A couple of them we've come back and said, maybe they're questionable, we'll reevaluate if they're still needed. These are some of the big ones and a few small ones. Allison Lane, Utica Pike, those were 2 of the really larger projects that happened over multiple phases. Allison Lane was one of the first ones that we did back in 2000, and I want to say 2008. It may have been phase 1 before the master plan. Then we did the 2nd and 3rd phases. Utica Pike, we're really hoping that Duke is going to get their pole out of the way here in the next couple weeks, and Utica Pike is going to get finished up with our current phase. Some of the others were smaller ones. Snapshot, you're just going to see that we have different styles of development throughout Jeffersonville, as you're all aware. Downtown is very much different than the far northeast of town, and so if you see more projects in one area versus the other, it's because of the style of development and the walkability of that area. You'll see that things are changing around Veterans and Holman's, and now that with the Big 4 bridge is open, that's been one of the larger items that's changed things. Throughout this process, we've met with city planning and zoning and engineering as well to go through some of the comprehensive plan, the transportation plan as a part of that. It identified, 4 main corridors, and we've looked at all of those. This year, Veterans and Holman's, when that finally gets complete at some point, that's going to open up a major pedestrian thoroughfare that's going to go all the way from 10th and Allison to Clarksville and to the neighborhoods in each direction. 10th Street, last year when it was completed, it connected, made a big corridor there to Jefferson Commons and Jefferson Ridge, which are going to be large developments. Those large developments. And at some point here, we're going to make a connection to River Ridge from the area that's out, the neighborhoods that are out in that area, hopefully to have a walking corridor there so people can walk to work. Big Four, the Arts and Cultural District, these are all things that walkability is very important and has become a very vibrant area. Parks, as we talk about Vissing Park, which was completed a number of years ago, Chapel Lake Park, which is under construction right now, having walkability to that park from all the adjacent neighborhoods. The Greenway, Jeffersonville Tree Walk project that's just kicking off in another community, sort of this one as well, River Heritage Conservancy. I mean, that's going to be, you're going to have a pedestrian corridor that goes through all of southern Indiana here at some point. We've looked at neighborhood revitalization plans to make sure that we're aware of those. We've looked at the bike and ped plan and the routes that it identified, just so we can make sure we're keeping consistent with all the other plans going on in the city. The Spring Street and Court Avenue plan, obviously important to have so that we can make sure we're being consistent with the other items going on in the city. This one right here was a big one because it identified the 10th Street corridor. 10th Street corridor, one of the main corridors in Jeffersonville, as you know, making sure that now that this year as that road project completes, that we've got all the little feeders that get you from the neighborhood or the side streets that get you from there onto 10th Street so that you have a safe route. Main Street, Nahan, Oak Ridge, Reeds, these are all streets that come in there. So we want to make sure that we have a plan to make those pedestrian networks functional. So as we've been through a number of slides pretty quickly there, we wanted to identify that we're looking at those plans and we're making sure that we're keeping those moving along. There are common threads or themes in all of them as we sat down with planning and zoning. There's a consistent path that we want to make sure we hit, and we're trying to do that. We are identifying new projects, just as we're taking the old projects that didn't get completed. We're reevaluating them and their need. We're identifying new ones based on these other plans and based on your all's input, the mayor's input, planning and zoning's input. We're trying to take those and prioritize them. You'll have a group of small projects, low-hanging fruit that continues to be able to be done, sometimes in-house, other times with just a small quote. And then you'll have the $500,000, $750,000 projects that are more of a plan out for a year and have it on the books. These are some streets that we think need to be continued with sidewalk projects along with the bike and ped plan. At some point, continuing Utica Pike out for the scenic thoroughfare that it is. 10th Street will have to have a connection made. 10th Street has everything between 265 and Allison Holman's, and then we're going to have downtown all the way to Reeds, I think that's, but you're going to have a piece in there in the middle that at some point we need to connect so that you have a well-traveled route. Middle Road, we've got portions of Middle Road that we need to go on and connect or work in conjunction with residential development and other things to make them happen. We've looked at these plans and want to make sure we make these connections, downtown being the most walkable. You'll see a lot of interest in downtown and making sure that we fill in the gaps. You've got large neighborhoods that we have to find a way to make these work. Oak Park, a subdivision that has no sidewalks. we'll have to see if the neighborhood wants them. I envision that some of those are going to be responses similar to going out into a neighborhood that doesn't want them. It's been that way for a long time, so we need to gauge the interest of the public in that area and find a path. Does it make sense to go to the elementary school in there, or does it make sense to make a route out to Allison Lane where we have a major thoroughfare, or to get to Middle Road? Those are the kind of things we're going to look at. Springdale, does it make sense to finish that connection from 8th Street to 10th Street with that route? Gateway Crossing, Bridgepoint Commons, Water Tower Road, all the areas that are happening out in District 6 in the growth area that continues. How do we make them walkable for the residents out there? Do we make a completion of New Chapel Road? Do we have a long-term plan for Utica-Sellersburg Road if it ever gets improved further on as the comprehensive plan calls out? How do we keep from going and putting in a sidewalk somewhere that maybe 10 years down the road we're going to have a large road project, so that we don't waste resources? Prioritizing, so we're looking at what was done before, we're looking at cost, we're looking at impact. Which projects are going to have the most bang for your buck? How many residents are going to be impacted by it? What kind of connections are we making? Are we making an access point for someone that's going to walk to work? Are we making an access point to recreation? All the things you guys are thinking of, we're just trying to put them on paper. So this is kind of the opportunity here to open it up to questions and comments, and each of you has a 12 by 18 drawing in front of you, which is the same thing that's on the screen, but zooming into that's a little difficult, and we can do that. But what we have done on there is we've identified, the yellow on your map shows proposed but not completed under the original, the 2011 master plan. We threw out the ones where the neighbors said they didn't want it. These are the projects that remained after that. So you've got Springdale and Kiwanis, parts of Middle Road, part of Vissing Park Road, where we said at some point that may get built by private development. But those are the projects that were carryover from the last master plan. We want to continue those if the city still has interest in doing them. There's a lighter blue color, which is what we think are potential new projects after we've looked at all the plans and sat down with planning and zoning. These are the projects we think make the connectivity that needs to happen. There's a magenta or a more purple line. Those are projects that probably need to happen, but we think maybe they're better suited to be done in conjunction with a private development. Worley Road was on the original and got taken out, and we put that back as if development happens along that road, that's a good project to do with that development to complete that route. And then there's a darker blue line which kind of stands out as Dutch Lane, Charlestown, Jeff Pike, and Utica-Sellersburg. Those are all projects we believe have to be done with a road project, so you use those resources appropriately. Dutch Lane has been a project it's brought up regularly, but Dutch Lane will have major impacts to utilities, road widening, storm drainage. It's a good project, but it needs to be done in conjunction with some kind of a widening and rehabilitation project. The next step after this, Andy and I were discussing posting something on the website, giving an opportunity for residents, property owners, taxpayers to send in their projects they want to see so we can look at them, consider them, and add them to the plan if they fit.
Hey Josh.
Yeah.
I want you to kind of you have it on here, but kind of put a pin in it for public safety. You know where the new dollar store was built in Allison Lane and Woodland? Or not Allison Lane, 10th Street and Woodland?
Yes.
Well, being that that dollar store has been built, we're getting a lot of foot traffic with kids pushing strollers coming from Gardenside. You got Liberty Point right there, and even coming from Jonquil, walking to the dollar store. And the way that rate of speed when they're coming off of 10th Street to pull it in there. It's really like the public safety. I've been contacted by Gardenside, the Brandon Westerfield with, does he still have something to do with Liberty Point? Because he's contacted, I forwarded everything to you, Andy.
He's building houses in there.
Yeah, so we've been in contact with them, and then several of the residents on Jonquil where there was like near misses, where they were taking their grandkids to, just walking to the dollar store.
And this would be on Woodland coming out to 10th, connecting the apartments and the neighborhood.
Yes,
Okay.
that's more of a, you know, I kind of put a pin in Hopkins for public safety, so I just wanted to
Absolutely.
bring that up
I mean, it's
publicly.
on the list, but you want to make it more of a priority on the top of the list, because it's on the...
Yeah, it's being that, and I also had a couple of the Jeff police officers say something to me too about that, where they're coming off there. When you've got kids and you've got pushing strollers, it's a narrow street anyhow, so it's not a big stretch. And I guess Liberty Point was
But the
approved in
only-
the county, so they don't have to put the sidewalks in there, I guess.
And that project right now would go just to connect to the development that's occurred, because we don't have any pedestrian route currently on 10th Street in that stretch. Okay.
Well, you have where the dollar store put theirs in.
Okay.
But I haven't seen anybody walking from 10th Street. It's just coming from the apartments, Liberty Point and Jonquil is usually
Okay.
where I see the foot traffic coming to and from.
Do you got, either way, but you know, how many miles of sidewalk does the city have?
I don't have that all.
A lot.
A lot, and it would be a kind of a difficult one to assess, because downtown you have sidewalks on both sides of the street for most of downtown. We could put a linear foot or mileage of what's been built over the last 10 years, but we haven't done an overall city.
My next impossible question, what's the lifespan of a sidewalk? I know.
We were
Depending
discussing.
on the traffic and pressure, and I know all these things, but
Sure.
I don't care about that, give me an answer.
You know, you'll go into neighborhoods and you'll see concrete sidewalks that have been there for 40 years, and some of them are still in great shape, and some of them you had a tree planted next to them and it gets uprooted. So the concrete has a very long life cycle. It's going to be 40 years plus if it doesn't end up with chemicals that are placed on it, and it doesn't end up with a tree or some damage to it. Very long life cycle for the concrete.
One in front of my house has been there at least 40
60.
years. 60.
Yep.
And Josh, does any of the utilities, well, probably better, but do they notify you when, especially Indiana American Water, they are so slow about putting the sidewalk back, so I just started contacting them myself. And then they're really good, because you get the higher ups, they're really good about working with me, but I'm telling you, they tear up our sidewalks and then they don't replace them, they don't fix them.
A lot of the problems we have with utilities when we see that, Indiana American's fairly responsive when we get a hold of them,
Yes.
but it's not always happening up front. One of the problems that they have is they have a contractor that comes in and does the water line work. If there's a repair or something that needs to happen, they have a contractor that does that. But then they have a separate contractor that they hired to come in and do the restoration work. Those two don't always talk real well to each other, so we have to remind them that, hey, you tore this up, it needs to be repaired. That's both for asphalt and concrete.
Let's propose a statute because of that. Sometimes they go back.
Right.
I think we passed something that cleaned them up.
Well, one of the things that you've done is in the past, we've never had a bond. We've never been able to hold a bond. There was a payment. They cut the asphalt. They were coming in and paying $40 to cut the asphalt, and then we had nothing to hold over them after that. You passed an ordinance now that we actually have a bond that we don't let go of until it's finished.
Of course, my district's older district, I got a lot of ADA, people in their wheelchairs and all that, they'll contact and say, hey, this has been out, I can't get through, I can't. But a lot of times when I contact them, they didn't even realize the work was done.
Yeah.
But then they are responsive once I contact them, but
And in general, I think most of you know, but in general, we have two major pots of money for sidewalks. One is replacing sidewalks. You give me a pot of money for ADA transitions and replacing the existing sidewalk that is in bad shape. And what we're really talking about tonight is putting in new sidewalks. Where do we not have connectivity at all?
I have a question. You know, I go to some communities up north, like a Carmel or Westfield, and I see the sidewalks are actually asphalt and are wide, almost like a recreational path. have we looked into doing that in any areas? Would that make sense, or is that part of the public meetings to see if there's an interest in doing that? What's the advantage or disadvantages?
Advantage is, I think it's a little cheaper to do that up front. You have to replace it or repair it more often. It's just a balance. Your asphalt does not last as long.
I sat in a presentation at road school 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was, and there were Carmel, I want to say the Monon Trail was one of the presentations, and a lot of that is asphalt. And the comment that they gave is that you do have to maintain it. It has to become one of your roads, similar to one of your roads, maybe in a different life cycle. But now as you go and mill and pave a road project, if you do a trail, a path with asphalt, you got to put it in there that, in 10 or 15 years, you're going to go and you're going to mill and pave, but in between you're going to be out sealing joints and checking on cracks and other things so you don't get issues. We did look at that on Utica Pike when we were doing, I think it's an 8 or 10 foot path, as we were looking at Utica Pike, the piece near Duffy's. We had looked at that, but because of its location and potential for flooding with the river, we decided against it.
I'm curious about the width of the sidewalks. I know when we first started this, because there was nothing there, our sidewalks were fairly narrow, which is still a huge improvement from where we were. But now as everything develops around it and there's a lot of traffic, people can't even really walk, side by side in some of these areas.
We initially, Charlestown Pike, which were some of the very first ones, Charlestown Pike and the upper stretch of Hamburg that goes to the Y, those were all 4 foot wide sidewalks. Somewhere mid-Charlestown Pike, the decision was made to go to a minimum of 5 foot, and that allows 2 people to walk side by side for the most part. So everything on 10th Street that we did, at least between Allison and Holman's, or Allison and 265, we did is 5 foot each side, and that's been the consistent. There are places where you end up with, you got just problems being able to, that extra foot doesn't sound like a lot, but when you got a power pole and a storm sewer and you got to have landscaping, and 5 foot has been kind of our minimum anymore.
I'll drop an aside into that comment. Lisa and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago too. We've been having some conversations with some of the developers. So right now, for sidewalks that you're funding, we're putting in 5 foot sidewalks. Our current subdivision regs say 4 feet. Okay, so when they're putting in sidewalks in new subdivisions, they're at 4 feet. We've been talking with them, some issues with where we put sanitary sewers. They're wanting to move those out of the street and kind of into the green space. They're wanting to give themselves a little bit more green space, so we're talking about narrowing the roadway width up a little bit and widening the sidewalk, and that would still give us some more green space. Planning and zoning is working on a change to their subdivision regs on that. You'll probably be seeing it in the next couple of months.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
We've talked with, I think one of the original pushbacks from narrowing, right now we have 28 foot wide asphalt roadways. We're looking to go to 24. One of the pushbacks, I think, from that in the past has been from police and fire, especially fire, getting fire trucks. If there's cars parked on both sides of the road. But I've talked with them, they said, Andy, that was really good 20 to 22 foot wide roadways. 24 feet, we really don't think we'll have a problem. Maybe it's important.
And really what we were talking about proposing, the county's done it for how long?
Yeah.
They have the narrow and it works really well. They never have complaints.
So, and it's,
We get in line with the county.
20 years from now, if we have to go back and pay, it's
Hey, I give credit where credit's due.
The city of Jeffersonville has done a great job with pedestrian access, and you guys are implementing so many projects that are impacting such a large number of residents, whether it's outlying subdivisions or downtown. You continue to do a great job, and this is a very meaningful plan that'll go together, and if it's anything like the last one, you do a great job at implementing it as well.
So this was done by the Board of Public Works?
The Board of Public Works is the mechanism for funding it.
Okay.
Yes. And so after this, we'll hold some public input sessions for residents to come in, provide comments, and also post through a survey function as well.
And I know it doesn't work like this, and I'm back to my impossible 2 questions. I'm just going to leave them alone. let's say that we have 100 miles of sidewalk, and let's say the average life of a sidewalk is 50 years. I've made up both these numbers. Well, then that means we should be prepared to replace 2 miles of sidewalk a year, and then in a with all of these new additions that we're having, and some of them, for example, with Coleman's Lane 62, Charlestown Pike, which I know that'll be wrapped into we won't be using money out of our creation fund, that'll be in a road project fund. So now, I guess, the end of the question is, do we have enough money? Because I know as much money as we give an engineer, they'll spend, you'll find a job. Because I walk downtown, there's plenty of places downtown where it's almost pulverized to, or people cross, it's pulverized to almost gravel at this point. Or would you say at this point we still have enough in that fund? And again, I know that you can spend whatever we give you, but is that fund enough, the rehabilitation, fixing what we have? Or do we need, next year's budget, do we need to look at?
I could easily spend twice as much as you give me, if not more, in replacing sidewalks every year. That's our, it's funny, Ed and I have had this conversation just here recently. I feel like if you give me $100,000 in my budget for 2019 to replace sidewalks, I need to spend $100,000. I feel like you as a council have said this is the effort that we want to see in replacing sidewalks. So yeah, I'm going to spend every dime of that if I can. And if you give me 200, I can spend 200. We have plenty of places, especially in the downtown area, that we can replace sidewalks.
Okay, and then my last, unrelated yet related question. The little section that connects New Chapel Road from the new development, we're putting in all these sidewalks on New Chapel to get to the park. Well, the other end, that little piece, used to be a dead-end road that went to nowhere and has a severe ditch on each side. Has there been a conversation yet about making that a road project, like not just putting in sidewalks, but like to where that'll handle more? Has anybody talked?
There's been a little bit of conversation between Josh and I about what we do with that piece of roadway.
And I'm talking about from the intersection of Eugene-Sellersburg, New Chapel to the new development. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. So we've had a little bit of conversation about it. We are looking at putting sidewalk in there. We're looking at getting the design on that underway this year. With that, I want to make sure that we're designing a sidewalk that's going to work with a new road section, if and when that ever comes.
Take Allison Lane for an example. A very wide road right-of-way on one side. We tried to set it back and make sure we had enough right-of-way that if Allison Lane ever got improved from Middle Road to Utica Pike, we're not wasting everything. And so if we do that on New Chapel, we'll look to see if it's feasible to do the same.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you all.
I'd just like to make one comment that we will be, I think Josh said, we will be holding some public input sessions. Those aren't always, as you know, very well attended, so we're going to be putting something out on Facebook, City of Jeff website, Twitter, things like that for surveys. But also, if you know your district very well, let us know. Give us some emails, let us know, stop by, we'll talk, give us your input. Okay. We're going to try to wrap this up in a couple of months.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you much. With that, workshop is going to end.